June 1944. Northern France was supposed to be moving fast. After the landings in Normandy, Allied commanders expected towns to fall one by one as German units pulled back. Many did, but not this one. The village of Saint-Lambert-sur-Dives sat along a narrow road boxed in by hedgerows and stone houses. Nothing special on a map, but to the retreating German forces it was a choke point, and to the Allies a doorway that had to be opened. By the time siegers from the Canadian Army reached the outskirts, smoke already hung over the rooftops. Burned-out vehicles blocked the road. A church bell tower stood cracked from shell fire, but one thing was clear. Someone inside was still in command and the white flag that never came. Canadian scouts moved forward carefully, expecting the usual pattern: surround the town, call for surrender, take prisoners, move on. A loudspeaker team rolled up behind a tank and broadcast in German. "You are surrounded. Lay down your arms. You will be treated according to the rules of war." They waited. Minutes passed. Then a single rifle shot rang out from an upstairs window, shattering the loudspeaker horn. No white flag, no reply. Instead, machine gun fire erupted from 3 different buildings at once. Whoever was inside wasn't panicking. This was organized, deliberate. The Major A captured courier taken earlier that morning had already warned them. Inside the town was a German major, a career officer from the Eastern Front. His unit had been mauled during the retreat, but he'd gathered stragglers, artillery crews, even clerks, and turned the village into a fortress. And he had given one clear order: no surrender. Not here, not to the Canadians. He believed holding this position for even one extra day would let thousands of German troops escape the closing Allied trap to the east. To him, this village wasn't a town. It was a door he had to hold shut.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
The Canadians changed tactics. By late afternoon, it was obvious this wouldn't be a simple capture. Canadian officers faced a choice: frontal assault, fast but costly, or something slower, smarter. They chose the second option. Instead of storming the streets, Canadian units quietly pulled back out of rifle range. Then they did something the German major never expected. They didn't attack the village. They sealed it. Roads were mined. Fields were covered by hidden machine gun nests. Snipers took positions in barns and tree lines overlooking every exit. The Canadians weren't trying to break in anymore. They were making sure no one could get out. Night falls. Inside the village, German soldiers watched through shattered windows as the Canadians disappeared from view. The major believed they had backed off. He was wrong. As darkness settled, Canadian artillery observers quietly moved into position, not to level the town, but to do something far more precise. By morning, the German major would realize the fight had changed, and that the Canadians were about to defeat him without a single reckless charge. Night swallowed the village. Inside Saint-Lambert-sur-Dives, the German major walked from house to house with a lantern and a pistol at his side. His men were exhausted, short on ammunition, and cut off, but discipline still held. He told them the Canadians had pulled back. He told them relief would come. He told them they only had to hold until dawn. But outside the village, the soldiers of the Canadian Army were not retreating. They were positioning, silent observers. Under cover of darkness, Canadian artillery observers crawled into barns, orchards, and shell craters overlooking the village. Radios were unwrapped carefully. Antennas were raised low and hidden among branches. They weren't calling for a bombardment. They were mapping movement. Every truck engine heard. Every squad changing position. Every attempt to shift weapons. Coordinates were whispered, logged, and passed back to waiting artillery batteries miles away. The Germans still held the village. But now the village was a grid. The first breakout attempt, around 2 a.m., the German major made his move. If they stayed, they would be surrounded by daylight. If they moved at night, they might slip through. A column of vehicles rolled quietly toward the eastern road. Engines barely above idle, headlights off, infantry walking beside the trucks. They made it 300 meters. Then the night exploded. A single flare shot into the sky, turning darkness into ghostly daylight. Machine guns opened from the tree lines. Anti-tank guns fired from hidden hedgerows. Mines detonated under the lead vehicle. The road became a wall of fire and smoke. The column scattered, men diving into ditches, vehicles burning in the lane they thought was their escape. The Canadians hadn't just blocked the exits, they had been waiting, pressure without a charge. By dawn, the village was still in German hands. But everything had changed. Water was running low. Medical supplies were nearly gone. Vehicles meant for escape were now wrecks blocking the streets. And the worst part? The Canadians still hadn't launched a full assault. Instead, precise artillery began striking only key points. An ammo dump behind a farmhouse, a radio position in the church tower, a machine gun nest covering the main square. Each strike was surgical, deliberate. The major realized the truth too late. He wasn't fighting attackers anymore. He was trapped inside a slowly closing fist. Morning came with smoke instead of sunlight. The village that had felt like a fortress now felt like a cage. The German major stood in what had once been the town square, boots blackened with soot, coat torn at the sleeve. Around him, his men moved like shadows. Tired, hungry, shaken. The vehicles meant for escape still smoldered along the eastern road. The radio was gone. Ammunition was down to a few magazines per squad. And still, the Canadians had not stormed the town. That was what troubled him most, the realization. A young lieutenant approached, helmet dented, voice barely steady. "Sir, they're not attacking." The major already knew. Through binoculars, he had watched Canadian soldiers in the distance. Calm, patient, methodical. They weren't rushing. They weren't desperate. They were waiting. Every time a German position fired, artillery answered within minutes. Every movement was seen. Every strong point was slowly neutralized. The Canadians weren't trying to win quickly. They were making sure no one else had to die doing it. The white cloth. Near midday, another precise shell struck the edge of the square, collapsing a wall and sending dust across the cobblestones. No one cheered. No one shouted orders. The major looked around at the men who had trusted him. Clerks, drivers, teenagers pulled from retreating units, not the hardened force he once commanded, just survivors trying to make it home. He removed his gloves. From his satchel he took out a field dressing. White, clean, untouched. Slowly, deliberately, he tied it to the end of his map case rod. Some of his soldiers stared in disbelief. Others lowered their weapons with visible relief. The Canadians. Enter, the 1st Canadian Patrol entered cautiously, rifles ready but not raised. Faces tense, eyes scanning windows, doorways, rooftops. They had expected a final fight. Instead, they found silence. The German major stepped forward alone into the open square, the white cloth moving gently in the breeze. He stopped 10 paces from the Canadian sergeant leading the patrol. For a moment, the battlefield felt impossibly quiet. Then the major removed his sidearm, cleared it, and placed it on the ground between them. No speeches, no dramatic gestures, just 2 soldiers, from opposite sides of a long war, understanding the moment had ended. Aftermath. By afternoon, columns of prisoners were being escorted out of the village. Wounded were treated. Fires were put out. Civilians emerged cautiously from cellars. The village still stood, not because it had been destroyed, but because the Canadians had chosen patience over fury, and precision over sacrifice. And the German major, who had sworn never to surrender here, had finally realized the fight he was continuing was no longer saving lives, only spending them.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.